This is section F for fun. Now that we've had, I'll just kick back and enjoy the ride. How many of you vegetable producers? Oh, I have a captive audience. I saw 3 hands. Maybe at the end I can convince some of you to broaden your programs or your operations to include vegetables. This is one of my, passions. So away we go. So yeah, this is a huge topic and almost impossible to cover in 20 minutes. And our goal is to have a more complete conversation at the end. So please interrupt me though, really, if you have a clarifying question. So these are some of the points I'm going to hit in the next 20 minutes or so. Like, what's the problem? Why are we even talking about cover crops and vegetable systems? Some specific ways that we use cover crops in veg systems. And then, termination strategies, which I think is really critical, and how that might impact some of the key benefits and reasons why people plant cover crops to begin with. And then along the way, I'll point out some recommended readings and other resources for you to follow up with after the conference. So one of the primary problems with vegetable production systems now is that we don't have enough vegetables, believe it or not. So Americans just historically have not eaten enough fruits and vegetables for a long time. We are grossly less than the recommended daily allowance that the USDA guidelines prescribe. And if we were to produce enough vegetables so that everybody in the U.S. ate their recommended amount, we would need significantly more acreage. Okay, so where does that leave us? We need significantly more acreage, because the links between human health and environmental health are pretty close, and we talked about that today. Another issue specific for organic systems is that we have an export margin that is greater than our import margin. Got a lot of produce coming in from Mexico, also Canada, particularly greenhouse, which will perhaps change as guidelines change or not change, we'll see. So trying to rectify traditionally what has been a very tillage-intensive production system with some of the sustainability goals that we have now is a challenge. And it's not just recent history. This is an old file photo from Florida. This is celery production in Florida, and judging by the looks of the picture, I'm going to guess it was from the 40s, because we haven't had a big celery industry in Florida in some time. This land has been farmed and farmed and farmed almost to death. And you ever been to South Florida? Y'all should come. Next year, next time, let's do the conference in Florida. Because it's cold here. So one of my primary motivations for doing vegetables and cover crop research is water quality and quantity in Florida. And this is a huge issue for us, and it probably is for some of you in your states. First of all, we have a karst topography, which means that our parent material is limestone. And over the years, as the ocean has receded, it's drawn back a lot of the clay, and it has left this persistent cavernous network of underground rivers and streams. Really, we have rivers that just disappear and reappear miles down the road. It's pretty cool. But that is that's a point of interest for our vegetable producers and our crop producers. So managing our fertility is very important, and managing our water is very important. So we have regulations by our Florida Department of Agriculture that are in response to a lawsuit that we received from the EPA. So we've done a lot of research on identifying our water quality basins and how, and then developing specific practices to meet those standards. Okay. California, which is the other large vegetable production state, has very similar situations. Here in the Salinas Valley, which is this valley here, this picture shows, I know you guys are in the back, but this picture shows groundwater changes. So this is a decrease in water table levels over time. And these were measured from 2011 to 2015. And if you see orange and red, that's bad. Okay, so
Honestly, I can't even read my own slide, but it was up to 100 feet. That's bad. So there are nitrate issues as well. This other graph here on the side, and this is a report that's available online if you're interested in looking at it. And then this slide shows the concentration of nitrate in wells, and red is bad. So we've got over 90 milligrams per liter of nitrate, and the recommended limit is 45. Okay, so if you see orange or red, we're in trouble. There's a lot of orange and red on that slide. So this is kind of what we're trying to get away with. This is a fantastic picture of bed shaper, and I love this, and we see this in Florida. Every large farm we go on has this piece of equipment. But this is a lot of wear and tear on our soils. Okay? So when you think of vegetable production systems, there's a couple of places where we could use cover crops. One of them is the field perimeters. Okay, so if you're new, you're just getting started, just planting some cover crops around the outside or in your alleyways is a good place to start. You can watch the benefits happen right there. A lot of folks plant cover crops in the bed furrows. Okay, most of our producers are on a raised bed system, and so they use cover crops in the furrows in a number of different ways. In the spring, rye is frequently used as a windbreak because there's a lot of sandblast. Our soils are very coarse, and when the winds come, it damages the succulent leaves of vegetables, and then we get disease. So rye is used often there. And it's also an opportunity to either drain moisture from collecting water in those furrows. In some parts of the state, we have a problem with too much water. We have standing water in fields many parts of the year. So cover crops help dry things out. And then in other areas, it's the opposite problem. It's really dry, and so creating some shade, having a living root under the soil is a good way to moderate that soil. And then of course the rotation. There's lots of reasons why vegetable producers use those rotations. It's really similar to crop, row crop goals. So taking a couple of examples here in field perimeters, this is some work that I did with my colleagues, and then there's some other work here that I was not involved with, but we looked at different cover crops in field perimeters for both vegetable and fruit systems. One primary pest of interest is stink bug, and that is a really tough one in organic production systems. And so we looked at sunflower and a bunch of different cover crops and identified this gigantic cultivar as one that would successfully trap stink bugs, enabling growers to spot treat and reduce the number of pesticide sprays in the crop. Okay. Russ Feisel did that work, and that you can find some really nice materials on the E Extension website, which is our national extension website. And you can look under the resource area called Organic Farming. And Russ Feisel has both webinars and fact sheets on stink bug management. So in other systems, in vegetable production systems, we use triticale, crimson clover, vetch, and sorghum have all been shown to attract some of these stink bugs, and so again, an opportunity to limit the number of sprays and the area sprayed. This is Billy and Scott Rooney, and their farm is just down the road from my research station. They have a 20-acre blueberry farm, and while they are not certified organic, they really don't like to spray pesticides. It's a value choice for them, and it's what their customers want. And so they were having some trouble with stink bugs, which are bad for blueberries, as you can imagine. And so we had a SARE on-farm grant to look at this, and we planted some buckwheat in the field perimeters and also intermittently in the alleyways of blueberry. And we got some very good results. And in the end, after a 2-year grant, they had stopped spraying insecticides in their blueberries, and we're just focusing instead on spraying those in the trap crop, which is a really good thing to be able to tell your customers that, hey, we didn't treat these blueberries, we treated the perimeter, so everybody leaves happy. Okay. This work is from Eric Brennan, who is a USDA ARS researcher in Salinas, California, and has done a lot of innovative work with vegetable systems and cover crops. He also has a YouTube channel. And you can check it out. But this was a paper that was published in Port Technology just a few months ago. And this is his solution for furrows, cover crops and furrows. So he makes the point you can do this in both conventional and organic systems. So in a conventional system, you would just burn that down. When you're ready, you're getting ready to plant your vegetables, probably glyphosate. And what that does is it allows those roots to decay slowly. But if you're organic, you can't do that. So you would plant succulent cover crops such as a mustard or buckwheat, something that's very easily terminated by mechanical tillage, and then you would terminate that and be on your way. So then the benefits there are that well, you have a living root, you're covering the soil. I don't want to sound like broken records though. So schematically, looking at opportunities to produce cover crops, I know that folks are here from all over the U.S., so it's virtually impossible to line this up, but I think of it this way, that we have summer as a cover crop opportunity for folks that are in the deep south, because nobody wants to grow vegetables then. It's way too hot, and the disease pressure is too great. So that's our cover crop growing season in Florida. As you move north, it becomes winter. That's your long cover crop season. Okay? So in between there, if you're a vegetable producer, you can either have a couple of long rotations of vegetables, longer season crops, or you can have a series of shorter season crops. It just depends what your market is and your specialty. In between those shorter season crops is a really great opportunity to put another short season cover crop. Okay? So buckwheat works really well when it's cool. It's easy to terminate. It provides flowers at a time when flowers aren't really available. And so if your crop needs pollination by bees or other pollinators, then planting buckwheat ahead of that would be a good idea because you're keeping them on the farm. So when I talk to farmers and they're interested in planting cover crops for their crop rotations, it's a series of why and how questions. So the farmer says, well, I'm going to do cover crops, but I don't really know what to do. Okay, well, why do you want to do cover crops? Well, because I have a lot of weeds and I heard that they cut down weeds. Okay, so why do you want cover crops and not some other mechanism, like cultivation, or if they're a conventional grower, herbicide? And then they'll give me an answer. And we just go back and forth until I finally have a whole story. It's a lot of whys. And sometimes these conversations take a good half an hour, but it's a great strategy. And at the end of the day, we've got a primary objective. We've got a feel for the comfort level of that farmer, what they're willing to risk and what they're not willing to risk. And then we work together and craft an entry point to put cover crops into that system. And if they're really uncomfortable, like the perimeter or the furrow piece is a good way to start. Okay, so in terms of specific rotations, here's some examples here that have been researched recently. There's some really fantastic video references. The SARE Cover Crop Innovator Series, of course, and I was happy to host the Nebraska film crew that came to Florida and interviewed some of the small farmers that I'm working with and also some of the larger row crop producers that I work with. And this is Eric Brennan's YouTube channel, and he produces all of these himself. They're quite entertaining, so I encourage you to watch them. They have animations and everything. So nested in these videos are all kinds of examples about crop rotations that work right now for these farmers and what we're looking at very closely in the university system, really trying to fine tune what's needed. Okay? So when a lot of our folks will decide to choose a cover crop because they want to eliminate nematodes or help manage nematodes, really eliminate them. And I am working with a nematologist right now about an organic carrot study in Florida looking at nitrogen rates. And we have a nematologist that just started at the university. I said, well, come down and take some samples because I would really be curious. I want to know what we have, on the site. So first call, I came back and says, you've got tons of nematodes. I'm really, really worried. I thought about it for a minute. I said, Zane, can you go back and sample the beneficial nematodes too? Because I'm just curious. I want to know what's out there. Because I didn't see a whole lot of nematode damage last year in my carrots. So we went back out there, and sure enough, you can calls me and he goes, "You got a lot of beneficial nematodes." And I said, "Well, yeah, because in organic systems, those counts might be really high. So if you're out there sampling and you submit your sample to the nematode lab, all they're going to count is the bad guys. So unless you go out of your way to find out what else is there, you may have this inflated concern that there's going to be a serious problem." Now, granted, for some species, 10 is a serious problem in your soil, so it's really species specific what those thresholds for management are. But I wanted to just bring that point to you. And this graph over here is one that he presented at the plant pathology meetings, and this is a faunal profile, and the way that it's done, the structural index down here is an indication of soil structure. So aggregation and other factors, and 10 would be the highest score, and 0 is the pits. And then as you go up here, this is the enrichment index, and so this is a measure of biodiversity. And so our research unit at the station in Florida measured here, so we had a very diverse ecology, but our soils were negatively impacted by the historical tillage that's taking place on that site. And a lot of that has been my research on cover crop management. So there's always a control, and that control is always a polytillage, because that's what the farmers are doing. So we're there. I will make the point that the conventional was way down here. So I felt a little bit better. We were doing something right in the organic systems. Now, the cover crop nematode pairing are very specific. Okay? So cover crop species vary among cultivars in their effectiveness to nematodes, and they vary to specific nematode species. Right? So you can't make these broad generalizations that X is good on root knots. You really have to dig deep and find out what that pairing is. And there's a lot of folks, particularly in pathology and entomology, that are very familiar with those pairings. So you can find that out for your area. Weeds is another big reason why people plant cover crops. This was a graduate student that I had. I sent her on a wild weed. There's a lot of weeds in organic farming systems, and I'd really like to encourage people to eliminate a few more of them. I've got a lot of farmers that think they're beautiful, and I think they're beautiful when they flower. And I'm also thinking, wow, that's a lot of weed seed this guy's gonna have to deal with in the spring. So I sent her on this goose chase to identify some papers that looked at common weeds as alternative hosts for economically important plant pathogens. And so she's put this table together. And so this is another thing to consider, that when you're planting cover crops, you're also eliminating these weeds from being that bridge for those pathogens to leave your crop and go live on a weed if you don't plant a cover crop, and then jump to your next cash crop. Okay? So these are the cycles that we want to interrupt when we plant a cover crop in rotation. One of the more complicated aspects of putting cover crops in vegetable systems is the method you choose for termination. And so there's really two ways you can go. You can incorporate the cover crop, or you can leave it on the surface. A lot of developing nations have intercropping and lots of things, but mechanistically that's kind of difficult for our growers to do economically. So I'm really looking at primarily these two options. So you incorporate your cover crop, it's probably the most flexible, because then you can come back and cover that with plastic. It takes a lot of tillage to do that, because you really want that material to be decomposed, or at least in small enough pieces that it's not going to interfere with the plastic layer or the drip layer. And again, you kind of wonder, well, we're planting a cover crop, and then we're just taking 3 steps backwards when we do all that tillage. Then there's a fallow period which we're forced into. So, for us in the spring, we plant the cover crop, things are looking great, we got a lot of biomass, we mow it, we incorporate it, and then we wait, and then the rains come, and then I'm so close to planting my vegetables, but here's the wind, and here's the rain, and then there's my soil. So it still leaves vulnerable places in the rotation that are concerned. Alternatively, if you leave the cover crop on the surface, which is the system that I really get excited about, it also has some cons. It's difficult to cultivate at times, unless you have the right equipment. you need a lot of biomass to really make it work. You know, a little bit of biomass isn't going to reduce your weeds. Okay? The thing that I really have noticed in Florida is that it imparts this stability of our soil environment. We've noticed when we have spikes in soil temperature and the surrounding plots, those plots that are covered in residue just stay the same. They are just smooth sailing. They're steady rolling. And that's really exciting to see, and that works with soil moisture as well. So I know from soil sampling, dry plot, and I hit the high residue plot, and I come out with this beautiful section of soil that's just uniformly moist and dark, and it's like, wow, this is great. And then, you know, there's challenges either way you go. You can both seed, you have volunteers, we have free growth if you don't have a complete termination. Those doing this, I came across this paper. It was from another presentation I had. I said, oh my gosh, look at that title. The time is now. This was a paper that Ron Morse did when he was at Virginia Tech, and it stated 1990. We are still having this conversation, right? So a lot of us have been doing this for a long time, and we're still going. So we move on. I just wanted to share that with you. Yay, 17 years. Hard work for that. So seeding strategies are pretty similar for row crop systems as they are for vegetable systems, but I'll say this, when you're working with raised bed systems, all wheels are off, because it's really hard to plant a cover crop, you know, in nice neat rows on top of a bed, unless you do some crazy stuff. And so here's something that we did. The only thing that we had to do what I needed to do was a John Deere no-till drill. And so we took a piece of angle iron and we just raised the whole drive wheel up so that the implement could drive over the bed top. And that actually worked really well. So we had a really good standard cover crop. So don't be afraid to try stuff. You know, if you want your system to work, you think you don't have the right equipment, and maybe you do. You just need to take a look at it. And, so what equipment do you have is always my second question when people say they want to plant cover crops. So mowing, different mowers, sometimes stock choppers are really the best solution. This top picture is sun hemp, which is a very popular summer cover crop for growers in the south, and I think it's what we like to grow pretty far up north too. But it's a fiber crop, and so when you take bush hog to it, it just shreds it. And I burned up 3 mowers this day. This was mower 1, and then there was mower 2, and then there was mower 3. And I probably said to the guys, "Do you guys have a stock chopper?" And so we got the stock chopper, which worked great. So you know, just be aware if you've got a lot of biomass, it's a lot of wear and tear in your equipment. So you really need to have appropriately scaled equipment to do the job well. Termination methods, this works. Roller-Crimping works for small farms, it works for large farms. I work with a farmer that made one of these. He calls it the Annihilator. It's kind of rock. So it's a 3-part tandem, you know, roller-crimper that he uses in his row crop systems. So a lot of these you can make, and a lot of these you can just buy off-the-shelf parts and tinker with. So here's an example of roller-crimping in a vegetable system. This was Dr. Kornecki at USDA ARS, and he got a conservation innovation grant to work with Mr. Randall, who was a vegetable grower in Alabama. And what they ultimately decided on was this system here of independently mounted smooth barrels, smooth rollers, followed by these crimper bars. And they did a bunch of different things, but initially the idea behind the design change was to reduce the vibration to the tractor. So this is what they ended up with after a lot of tinkering, and I like it. It's a pretty cool system. And he's happy with that. So this was a study that I did a couple of years ago, but I think it's a good illustration of all these different kinds of cover crop management systems. We had a 2-year study in the certified organic unit at my research station, and we looked at jalapeno peppers. We had 4 treatments. We had plastic mulch, no cover, residue, and incorporated residue. And so then we grew pepper and that, and that's what the plots looked like at the very beginning of the season. And then at the end of the day. So plastic mulch, had the highest yields in 1 year, but similar to some of the other treatments. And so for those growers that say cover crops are going to reduce my yield relative to plastic mulch, we could pretty convincingly say not necessarily. Here's an example in pepper, so we were happy with that. And I'm going to move on because Chris is standing. And so how did that happen? This was like 10 minutes. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
The end.
Yeah, pretty much. That was my last line. Yeah. So while Chris is